My name is Serena Whitmore. I'm 27 years old, and I've learned something people don't tell you until it's too late. The moment you finally feel safe is often the moment the past decides to knock. I was standing in my office the other night, lights off, only the city glow spilling through the glass, when my boyfriend, Ethan, found me frozen by the window like I'd forgotten how to breathe. He didn't ask a dozen questions. He just came up behind me, placed his hands on my shoulders, and said softly, "You went somewhere else." I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to be the polished woman who runs a company, who signs contracts, who speaks in calm, measured sentences. But my throat tightened anyway, like my body didn't care who I became. Because no matter how far I've climbed, there's still a 15-year-old version of me who remembers exactly what it feels like to come home and realize you don't have a home anymore. So let me start at the beginning. When I was 15, I worked part-time at a local grocery store, bagging, stocking, smiling at customers like my life was normal. I'd tuck my hair behind my ear, collect my paycheck, and hand most of it to my dad because he'd stand in the kitchen with that hard look and say we were behind again. He always said it like it was my fault. That day, I finished my shift late. My sneakers were damp from mopping up a spilled soda in aisle 6. I remember it because the sticky sweetness clung to me all the way home, and I kept thinking about a shower, about leftovers, about slipping into my bed and letting the world shut up for a few hours. I turned onto our street and saw nothing unusual. No for sale sign, no moving truck, no warning. Just our house, pale and ordinary, sitting in the same place it always had, like it had no idea what was waiting inside. I unlocked the front door and stepped in, and the first thing that hit me wasn't the sight. It was the sound. The silence was wrong, heavy, hollow, like the house had been emptied of air. My keys were still in my hand when I saw it. No couch, no TV, no pile of shoes by the door that my dad always complained about. The walls looked naked. The framed family photos were gone. Even the little dents in the drywall where the frames used to hang felt like they were staring at me. I took another step, slow, careful, like I might trip over an explanation. But the living room was stripped bare. The carpet showed pale rectangles where furniture had been. The lamp that always flickered was gone, leaving only a lonely outlet like a missing tooth. I drifted toward the kitchen, my heart thudding harder with every footfall. Empty counters, empty shelves. The refrigerator door stood slightly open, like someone had checked for something and left mid-thought. There were no magnets, no grocery list written in my mother's neat handwriting, not even the cheap plastic bowl we kept on the counter for loose change. For a second, I actually wondered if I'd walked into the wrong house. I stood there blinking, trying to make reality change its mind. But then I saw it. A single piece of paper on the kitchen counter, held down by a coffee mug I recognized, one of our mismatched ones with a chipped handle. My mother's handwriting. 3 words. "You'll figure it out." I read it once, twice, 10 times. My brain refused to accept that those words were meant for me. Like abandoning a 15-year-old was some kind of lesson. Like I was supposed to nod and say, "Oh, right, character development." My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I walked through the house in a daze, as if maybe they'd hidden in the closets for a prank, as if my little brother Lucas would jump out laughing. But Lucas's room was empty too. No posters, no messy bed, no dirty laundry pile. Just bare walls and a stripped mattress outlined like someone had erased him. I stood in the doorway and felt something sharp split inside me. Because Lucas and we weren't close in the sweet way people imagine siblings being close. He was younger, 13, loud and mouthy. He used to throw pencils at me when I tutored him through algebra, called me names when I corrected him, and then ran to our parents when I snapped back. And still, he was mine. He was my only consistent proof that I wasn't alone in that house. And now even that proof was gone. I found myself back in the kitchen, staring at the note like if I stared long enough, it would confess what I'd done wrong. I tried to rewind my last few days. Had I forgotten a chore, said something rude, gotten a bad grade, accidentally breathed too loudly? I was the responsible one, the one who tried. When I was 13, I baked my mom a birthday cake from scratch. I burned the edges a little, but I was proud of it. She took one look and said it was too sweet and lopsided. No thank you, no smile. When I was 14, I handed my entire paycheck to my dad when he said we were behind on rent. Weeks later, during one of his rants about me being worthless, I mentioned the money. He screamed like I'd insulted him just by remembering. I was always useful, but I was never loved, and now they'd proved it in the cleanest way possible. They didn't argue with me. They didn't even explain. They just erased me. 3 days later, the landlord knocked. I opened the door and he stared past me into the empty house, his eyebrows lifting like he'd stepped into the wrong timeline. He started, shifting his weight. They broke the lease early. My throat went dry. They left. He frowned, uncomfortable. Well, yeah, they're gone, but... He cleared his throat, eyes darting away, like he didn't want to watch this happen. You've got a week to clear out. A week? I echoed, like repeating it would make it sound less impossible. He gave a tight nod. I'm sorry, kid. Then he left me standing there with the kind of sympathy that feels like a door closing. That was the moment it fully hit. They hadn't just moved. They hadn't just needed space. They had left me with the consequences. They'd left me with the bill. That night, I slept on my best friend Ava's couch, my backpack hugged to my chest, like it could keep me from disappearing completely. Ava sat beside me, whispering, maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe they'll come back. But even then, deep in my bones, I knew better. Because misunderstandings don't come with empty walls. And they don't come with 3 words written like an epitaph. You'll figure it out. I lay there in the dark, listening to Ava's family move around their house, doors closing, someone laughing softly at a TV show, sounds of a life that continued to hold itself together. And I stared at the ceiling and realized something terrifying. The people who were supposed to protect me had decided I was optional. So if I wanted to live, I would have to become my own protection. I didn't know how. I didn't even know where to start. But I made myself a promise anyway. Quiet, shaking, and absolute. If they thought I'd vanish without them, if they thought I'd break and disappear, then fine, I would figure it out. But not the way they meant. The next morning, Ava walked me to the bus stop like I was going to school instead of falling off the edge of my life. She kept talking about maybe calling my mom again, maybe reaching out to a guidance counselor, maybe going to the police. And I nodded at the right moments because that's what you do when someone is trying to save you with ideas. But the truth was, I'd already tried. The night I found the note, after the shock wore off enough for my fingers to work, I called my mother's number until my phone heated in my palm. Straight to voicemail. I called my dad. Disconnected. I called Lucas. Disconnected. I sat on Ava's couch with my knees pulled tight to my chest, listening to the artificial cheer of recorded messages, and something inside me went numb in a way I didn't know was possible at 15. People always assume abandonment is loud. Screaming, door slamming, tears. Mine was quiet. It was the sound of a phone line that didn't connect. By noon, Ava's mother was hovering, the way adults do when they want you to understand something without saying it directly. She offered me a sandwich, asked what my plans were, then glanced at the clock like my presence had a timer. That evening, as I tried to fold myself smaller on the couch, she sat across from me with her hands laced together. "Serena," she said softly, "honey, it's not that we don't care about you." I stared at the carpet because I didn't trust my face. It's just, we have our own problems. There it was. The polite version of, you can't stay. Ava cried and argued. I tried to stop her because I couldn't stand being the reason their house felt tense. When I left, Ava walked me outside and shoved a crumpled 20 into my hand like it was a secret. "Call me," she whispered. I did call. For a while. But that's another kind of humiliation too, having to beg someone your own age to keep choosing you. By the end of the week, the landlord's deadline had turned my body into a frantic machine. I tried calling extended family. An aunt in Oregon I barely knew. Grandparents in Florida who sent Christmas cards with stiff handwriting and no warmth. Cousins I'd met once at a barbecue. Either the numbers were disconnected or the voices that answered acted like I'd dialed the wrong universe. "Oh, Serena?" a woman said, like she was searching her memory for a file she didn't want to open. No, sweetheart, I think you have the wrong number." It was like I'd been erased, not just from my parents' lives, from the entire family system, like someone had pulled my name out by the roots. On the 7th day, when the house had to be cleared, I stood on the curb with 2 trash bags of clothes, my backpack, and the last $43 I had. $43 to buy a new life. I kept staring at the street, waiting for a car to turn the corner, waiting for my mother to step out crying, saying she made a mistake, waiting for my father to come back and yell and then still come back, waiting for Lucas to text me a dumb meme and pretend none of this happened. Nothing. Just the sun moving across the sky like the world didn't care. I walked. Not because I knew where I was going, because standing still felt like dying. By late afternoon, I found myself outside a storage facility. The sign promised safe, secure, affordable. Affordable was all I heard. The woman at the desk barely looked up when she told me the price for the smallest unit. I slid the money across the counter with shaking hands, as if I was paying admission into something shameful. She handed me a key. No questions. A 5x10 box became my address. When the metal door rolled up, the smell hit first. Mildew, dust, something faintly sour, like old cardboard that had sweated for years. Mouse droppings in the corners. I stood there staring at the space like I'd stepped into a punishment. Then I lowered my bags inside and sat on the concrete floor because I didn't have the strength to pretend anymore. That first night, I didn't sleep. I listened to every sound, the echo of footsteps outside, the distant slam of a car door, the rattle of another storage door being pulled down. Every noise made me flinch. I kept checking my phone like maybe someone would call, but my phone stayed dead silent. Sometime after midnight, I pressed my forehead to my knees and whispered out loud, "What did I do?" And the storage unit didn't answer. The next morning, I remembered the YMCA. We had memberships once, back when my parents pretended we were a normal family. My card was in my wallet, bent and old. I waited until just before they opened, heart pounding like I was about to commit a crime, and slipped in when the front desk worker was distracted. I showered fast, the water scalding, trying to scrub off the smell of the storage unit like it was shame embedded in my skin. When I left, I didn't look back. I ate peanut butter straight from a jar with a plastic spoon I'd stolen from the grocery store deli. Not because I was proud of it, because it was calories. Because hunger is louder than dignity. The first year was pure survival. At the public library, I lived at the free computers. I typed up resumes with fingers that still smelled faintly of cleaning chemicals and peanut butter. I printed them on paper I bought with quarters I found in parking lots. Most places wouldn't hire someone my age, and when they did look at me, their eyes always flicked down to my address line. Blank. "Do you have a phone number we can reach you at?" they'd ask. I'd give it. They'd nod. And then I'd never hear back. I learned quickly that the world has a way of sensing when you don't belong anywhere. It was in the way managers' smiles tightened when I said I could start immediately. In the way they asked, too casually, "So, where do you live?" I became a liar. Not because I wanted to deceive people, because truth got you turned away. "I'm staying with a friend," I'd say. Sometimes that was technically true if you counted the storage unit as staying and Ava as friend. But even lying didn't always work. One afternoon, after getting rejected from 3 places in a row, I sat on the library steps and watched families walk past with grocery bags and strollers and the kind of casual belonging that made my chest ache. I didn't cry. I couldn't afford crying. Crying costs energy. Then, finally, someone took a chance on me. Roz's Diner on 5th Street was the kind of place that smelled like coffee, that had been sitting too long, and fryer oil that lived in the walls. The sign outside flickered, missing 2 letters, so at night it looked like it was warning you. R and SDINER. Inside, booths were patched with duct tape, and the floor always felt slightly sticky, no matter how many times it was mopped. I walked in with my resume folded too many times, palms sweaty, and asked if they were hiring. The owner, Betty, came out from the back, wiping her hands on an apron. She was in her 60s, hair in a tight bun, eyes sharp, like she could slice you open with a look. She looked me up and down without hiding it. "You running from something, kid?" she asked. My mouth went dry. For a second, I almost told her everything. Almost begged. But something about her tone, like she'd already seen desperation and wasn't afraid of it, made me straighten. "Running to something," I said. Betty stared for a long moment, then snorted like she didn't believe in hope but respected audacity. "Can you carry plates without dropping them?" "Yes." "Can you stay awake past midnight?" "Yes." "Can you work hard and shut up when you're tired?" "Yes." She jerked her chin toward the back. "Then you start tonight. Minimum wage. Night shift. Cash for now." I blinked. "Just like that?" Betty leaned closer, lowering her voice. "I don't care where you sleep, Serena, but you show up. You do your job. You don't steal. And you don't bring trouble to my door." My throat burned. "I won't," I promised. And I meant it. That first night, I worked until 3 o'clock a.m. My feet were on fire. My arms ached from carrying plates and refilling coffee and scrubbing tables so hard the vinyl squeaked. And when the last customer finally left and the door clicked locked, I stood there swaying with exhaustion, thinking about the long walk back to the storage unit. Betty watched me for a second, then tossed a rag into the sink. "You got somewhere to go?" she asked, like it was casual. I lied automatically. "Yeah." Betty's eyes narrowed. She knew. She didn't call me out. She just nodded toward the back office. "There's a couch. It ain't pretty. Lock up when you leave." I stood there frozen, because kindness, when you haven't had it in a long time, feels almost like danger. Like a trap. Like the moment before something is taken away again. Thank you," I managed. Betty waved her hand like she hated gratitude. "Don't get soft," she muttered. "Go sleep. I curled up on that couch with a thin blanket that smelled like detergent and cigarettes. And for the first time since the note, I slept more than an hour without jolting awake. The storage unit still existed, the hunger still waited. The fear still sat in my ribs like a live wire. But now there was one small thing I hadn't had before. A place in the world, however tiny. A job. A key. A couch in a back office. And that's how survival works. It doesn't arrive as a miracle. It arrives as a woman named Betty who doesn't ask questions and still leaves you a pillow. Years later, when Ethan sees me drift off at windows like I'm watching ghosts, he thinks it's the emptiness that haunts me. He's not wrong, but it's also the memory of that couch. Because that couch was the moment I learned something that shaped me into the woman I became. Blood can disappear overnight, but sometimes strangers show up. And if you're smart, if you're stubborn, you hold on to that. Not with neediness, with discipline, with a plan. Because that first year taught me the most brutal truth of my life. No one was coming to save me. So I started saving myself. Survival is loud at first. It screams in your ears when your stomach hurts and your feet ache and your future feels like a locked door with no handle. But after a while, survival goes quiet. It becomes routine. And routine is dangerous. Because once you're no longer panicking, you start noticing things. Patterns, opportunities, cracks in the world where someone like you might fit. For me, that quiet started at Ross's Diner. I learned the rhythm of the night shift so well I could tell what time it was just by how the coffee tasted. Burnt meant midnight. Fresh meant the after-bar crowd. Bitter meant 2:30 a.m., when everyone was tired and nobody wanted to go home yet. I learned which customers tipped and which ones never would. I learned how to keep my face neutral when men said things they wouldn't dare say to a girl who looked protected. And I learned how to listen. Listening was my real education. One night, around 1:00 a.m., two men sat in booth 3, the cracked vinyl one that leaned slightly to the left. They wore wrinkled button-down shirts and talked too loud, the way people do when they think no one important is paying attention. I refilled their coffee twice before I realized what they were complaining about. The cleaning company skipped us again, one of them said, slamming his mug down. Trash still there. Bathroom's disgusting. The other snorted. We've been through 3 services this year. Nobody shows up consistently. I stood there holding the pot, my heart starting to beat faster, not with fear, but with something sharper. Possibility. I walked back to the counter, poured the coffee, and tried to tell myself not to be stupid. I was 15, living out of a storage unit, wearing shoes with a hole in the sole. What business did I have talking to grown men about contracts? But then I thought about the storage unit, the peanut butter, the couch, and something inside me hardened. I walked back to their booth, hands shaking just enough to scare me. "Excuse me," I said, forcing my voice steady. I couldn't help overhearing. "Are you serious about needing new help?" They looked up at me like they were seeing me for the first time. "Ma'am," one raised an eyebrow. "How old are you?" "Old enough to be dismissed. Old enough to be underestimated." I swallowed. "Old enough to work harder than anyone you've hired." They laughed. But it wasn't cruel. It was surprised. The first man leaned back. "You got experience?" "I clean this place every night," I said, "and I show up." Something shifted in the air. People underestimate how powerful consistency sounds to someone who's been disappointed repeatedly. They exchanged a look. "Come by our office tomorrow," the second man said finally. "We'll give you a trial run, $50 a week." $50. It didn't sound like much to them. To me, it sounded like oxygen. The next day, I borrowed Betty's old mop bucket, showed up early, and cleaned that tiny accounting office like it was a palace. I scrubbed baseboards, emptied trash, wiped fingerprints off doors no one ever wiped. When I finished, the place smelled like lemon cleaner and effort. They nodded. By the end of the week, they gave me a second office, then a third. I kept working at the diner, stacking plates by night and scrubbing toilets by morning. I slept wherever I could, sometimes the back office couch, sometimes the storage unit. I wrote down every dollar I earned in a notebook I found in a dumpster behind an office building. Every expense, every receipt. Because when you've been abandoned, control becomes comfort. By the time I turned 17, I was cleaning 6 offices a week. I moved out of the storage unit and into a tiny studio apartment above a Chinese restaurant. It smelled like soy sauce and grease, and the radiator clanked like it was angry about being alive. But it was mine. I slept on the floor at first, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ceiling and listening to the kitchen below chop vegetables late into the night. For the first time in 2 years, I locked a door behind me and knew no one could take the space away. I kept the diner job. Not because I needed it anymore, because I needed Betty. She became something I didn't have a word for back then. Not a mother, not family, but a witness. Someone who saw me show up every night and didn't let me disappear. I can't afford to, I said. She grunted. Fair. At night, after both jobs, I'd sit on the floor of my apartment with my notebook, planning. Community college brochures spread around me. Business administration circled in pen. I didn't know the words for it yet, but I was building a system, one that didn't rely on anyone else's mercy. Years passed like that. Quiet. Relentless. By the time I was 20, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was growing. I hired my first employee, Danny. He showed up for the interview shaking, hands clasped tight, eyes too honest. Former addict, 8 months clean. Everyone else had turned him away. I saw myself in him. Not the addiction, the second chance. Then Carmen, a single mother, fired from 3 jobs because childcare fell apart every time life did. Then Pete, old, sharp, stubborn, living in his car because no one wanted to hire a veteran with bad knees and worse memories. We weren't just a business. We were a patchwork. And somehow it worked. Clients trusted me. Word spread. I enrolled in night classes, paid in cash. To my professors, I was just another tired student with good attendance. They didn't know I cleaned bathrooms before class or did payroll on my lunch break. I liked it that way. The breakthrough came when I landed a contract with Henderson and Associates, the biggest law firm in the city. Their office manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, looked at me over the rim of her glasses during our meeting. You're young to be running a company, she said. I've been taking care of myself for a long time, I replied. She signed. That contract changed everything. Within 6 months, I quit the diner. Betty pretended not to care, but she hugged me so hard it bruised. I moved into a real apartment. Bought a used Honda Civic in cash. Bought a laptop. That laptop was freedom. Invoices, spreadsheets, a website. By 22, I expanded beyond cleaning, maintenance, organizing, even light design consulting. People trusted me with their spaces, with their messes, with things they didn't want to admit out loud. And still I didn't date. I didn't let people close. Because success doesn't heal abandonment. It just gives it nicer furniture. It wasn't until years later, after the business had grown, after the money had stabilized, that Ethan entered my life. He didn't rescue me. He didn't fix anything. He just stayed. And that terrified me more than sleeping in a storage unit ever did. Because survival taught me how to build, but it didn't teach me how to rest. By the time I was 22, people started using words about me that didn't feel like they belonged to my life. Impressive. Driven. An entrepreneur to watch. They said those things while standing in clean offices with polished floors my team and I had scrubbed the night before. They said them like I'd always been headed here, like this was destiny, not desperation sharpened into discipline. From the outside, my life looked solid. I had employees, contracts, a growing client list that came mostly from word of mouth. People trusted me with their spaces, their keys, their alarm codes. Trust was currency. And I was rich in it. But what nobody saw, what I didn't let anyone see, was how tightly wound I still was inside. I slept light. Every unexpected noise jolted me awake like I was back in the storage unit, listening for footsteps that meant danger. I kept my phone charged obsessively, panic bubbling if the battery dipped below 30%. I triple-checked locks. I memorized exit routes everywhere I went, because a part of me was still 15, still waiting for the world to disappear overnight. That's why I finally agreed to therapy. Not because I felt broken, because I was tired. Dr. Grace Williams' office was warm and quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intentional instead of threatening. She was in her 50s, silver threading her hair, eyes that didn't rush you. The first session, I talked about my business for 40 minutes straight. Revenue, growth, expansion plans. She listened patiently, then asked one simple question. And how are you doing, Serena? The words hit me like a trapdoor opening. I stared at my hands. I'm functional, I said. She nodded. Functional isn't the same as okay. That was when the truth started leaking out. Slow, careful, like I was afraid it would flood the room if I let it out too fast. The storage unit, the note, the way my family vanished like I'd never existed. Dr. Williams didn't interrupt. When I finally stopped talking, she leaned forward slightly. Survival mode served you well, she said. But you're not surviving anymore. You're living in a body that still thinks danger is imminent. I frowned. I'm successful. She smiled gently. Success doesn't erase trauma. It just gives it better camouflage. I didn't like that, because if success didn't fix me, then what had all this been for? Over the next year, therapy became a strange mirror. Dr. Williams helped me see patterns I didn't want to admit. How I overworked because rest felt unsafe. How I trusted employees before I trusted friends. How I kept relationships shallow because deep ones came with expectations. How do you feel about needing people? She asked once. I laughed, sharp and humorless. I don't. She waited. I corrected, quieter. I don't let myself. That was the truth. Needing people had cost me everything once. I wasn't going to let it happen again. That's why Ethan scared me. We met through work. He was consulting for a mid-sized firm I'd recently taken on as a client. He was calm, observant, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. At first, I treated him like everyone else. Professional, cordial, distant. But he noticed things, like how I flinched when my phone rang late at night, like how I never talked about my family, like how I always paid the check immediately, as if waiting invited danger. He didn't push. He just stayed present. When we started dating, I made my rules clear. I'm busy, I told him. I don't need fixing. I don't do drama. He smiled. Good, neither do I. That should have reassured me. Instead, it made my chest tighten. Because drama, I knew how to handle. Stability, that was unfamiliar territory. Still, my life kept expanding. By 24, I'd hired more employees, rented a small office space, started offering consulting services to other small businesses, organization, efficiency, systems. People paid me to teach them how to build stability. The irony wasn't lost on me. Around that time, Dr. Williams asked a question I'd been avoiding for years. What would you do if your family reached out? The room went very still. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't think about them. She raised an eyebrow. You think about them all the time. You just don't let yourself feel it. I hated that she was right. Because every success, every milestone had a shadow. A quiet voice asking, would they care now? Would I be enough now? I told myself it didn't matter. That I'd moved on. That I was healed. But healing isn't proven by how far you run. It's proven by what you do when the past finally catches up. And it did. On a Thursday night, when I was 25, alone in my office, reviewing quarterly reports with the city glowing outside my window, I heard the ping of my inbox. The subject line froze my blood. From your loving family. For a long moment, I didn't open the email. I just stared at the subject line, my reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. Older, sharper, composed in a way 15-year-old me would never recognize. From your loving family. The word loving felt like a dare, like they were testing whether time had softened me enough to accept a lie without choking on it. My phone buzzed on the desk, a text from Ethan. Still at the office? Want me to bring dinner? I typed I'm fine, then deleted it. Something came up. I'll call you later. I needed to be alone for this. I opened the email. Serena, sweetheart, I heard about your success through a mutual friend who saw your article in the paper. Your father and I are so proud of everything you've accomplished. We always knew you were special, that you'd figure things out on your own. We'd love to reconnect and maybe meet for coffee sometime soon. We have so much to catch up on. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Not because it was long, because I was looking for something that wasn't there. An apology, an explanation, a single sentence that said we were wrong. Instead, there it was again. Polished, casual, unbothered. You'll figure it out. Like abandoning a child was foresight. Like suffering was a strategy. I closed my laptop, stood up, then immediately sat back down because my legs were shaking too hard to hold me. I felt angry, white-hot and sharp. But underneath that was something worse. Curiosity. The kind that worms its way into old wounds and whispers, what if? What if they had a reason? What if there was something I didn't know? What if all these years I'd been wrong about one thing? I hated myself for even asking. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying memories like crime scene footage, looking for clues I'd missed. Conversations that ended abruptly when I entered the room. Whispers behind closed doors. The way my parents used to look at each other when money came up. At 8 a.m., I called Dr. Williams and asked for an emergency session. She didn't sound surprised. How do you feel? She asked after I showed her the email. Angry, I said instantly. Then I hesitated. And curious. She nodded. Both can exist at the same time. I don't want them back, I said. I don't need them. Then what do you want? She asked gently. I opened my mouth, closed it. I didn't know. 2 days later, another email arrived. This one wasn't from my mother. It was from Lucas. Serena, I know Mom already reached out to you. I wanted to write separately because there are things she'll never say honestly. I was young when they left, but I remember more than they think. I never stopped thinking about you. I've wanted to find you for years, but I didn't know how. I'm sorry for how I treated you, for not fighting harder, for leaving. If you're willing, I want to explain what really happened. I stared at his name on the screen. Lucas, my little brother. The kid who used to throw pencils at me during homework and then hide behind me when our dad got angry. He'd been 13. I'd been 15. Neither of us had been old enough to be left behind. Something in his message felt different, less polished. More afraid. I replied with one sentence. What really happened? His response came within hours. It was long, longer than my mother's email, longer than anything I'd ever received from him. He wrote about the months before they left, about money problems I'd never known existed, about fights that happened while I was at work, about decisions made without me in the room. Then he wrote about the day they left, how they packed while I was at my shift, how he asked where I was, how he begged them to wait, how he begged them to take me. They said you were old enough to take care of yourself. They said you were strong. They said it would be better this way. My hands went cold. I cried, he wrote. I told them it was wrong. I thought it was temporary. I thought we'd come back for you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in 10 years, I let myself imagine that moment, not as something done to me, but something done around me. Lucas hadn't chosen to abandon me. He'd been carried along by it. That didn't erase the pain, but it shifted something. I agreed to meet him. Just him, no parents. We chose a coffee shop halfway between our cities. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. When I walked in, I recognized him instantly. He was taller, broader, but his eyes were the same, too expressive to hide anything. He stood when he saw me, like he wasn't sure whether to hug me or apologize or disappear. "Serena," he said, his voice breaking, "you look successful." I didn't know what to say to that. We sat. The first 20 minutes were agony. Small talk stretched thin, words bumping into memories neither of us wanted to name. Then he started talking. And once he started, he didn't stop. "I need you to know I fought for you," he said, tears filling his eyes. "I told them it was wrong. I told them you were family." I was 15, I said quietly. I wasn't strong. "I know," he said. "I know now." We talked for 3 hours. He showed me pictures of his life, his apartment, his work, his girlfriend. He asked about my business, my life, if I was happy. When it was time to leave, he hugged me tightly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just needed you to know the truth." I didn't hug him back right away, but I didn't pull away either. That night, in my hotel room, I called Dr. Williams. "I don't know what this means," I told her. "I don't know if I can trust him." "You don't have to decide anything," she said. "Understanding isn't forgiveness. It's just information." A week later, my mother called. Lucas had given her my number. Her voice sounded older, smaller. "Serena, baby," she said. "I'm so proud of you." "Were you proud of me when I was sleeping in a storage unit?" I asked. Silence. She cried, she apologized, she minimized. She called it a mistake. I called it a choice. When my father called a week later, something in me hardened. I told him I'd meet them, one last time. And I knew, even as I said it, that whatever happened next would change everything. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in a restaurant in Kansas City, hands folded around a mug I hadn't touched. I'd chosen the place carefully. Public, busy, neutral. Not a restaurant tied to memories. Not somewhere quiet enough for nostalgia to sneak in. I arrived early, sat with my back to the wall, and mapped the exits without thinking. Some habits don't disappear just because your life looks good on paper. When my parents walked in, I almost didn't recognize them. They looked smaller, older. My father's hair had gone completely gray, his shoulders slightly hunched. My mother had gained weight, worry lines carved deep around her mouth. For a split second, something soft tried to rise in me. Then I remembered the storage unit, the note, the silence. That softness died quietly. "Serena," my mother said, reaching for my hand. I pulled it back. "Let's get something clear," I said calmly. "I didn't come here to reconcile." My father's jaw tightened. "Now listen here." "No," I interrupted. "You listen." The table went still. I didn't come here to rebuild a relationship. I came here to say what I've carried for 10 years and to end this. My mother started crying immediately. My father crossed his arms. "Good." I told them everything. The storage unit, the hunger, the nights I slept with my phone clutched to my chest, terrified it would die before morning. The fear that followed me into every locked door, every quiet room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult them. I just told the truth. When I finished, my father cleared his throat. "We were in debt. We couldn't afford." "You couldn't afford 3 people," I said, "but you could afford leaving one behind." "We thought you'd be better off," my mother whispered. I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "I was 15. I didn't even know where you went." Silence settled heavy between us. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. "What do you want from me now?" My mother wiped her eyes. "We want our daughter back." "You don't get to want me now," I said. "Not after erasing me." "We could help you," my father said. "With the business." I stood up. "I never needed your help," I said. "I figured it out. Just like you said I would." I left money on the table for my coffee. "This is the last time we'll speak," I said. "I'm not your daughter. I'm not your family. I'm a stranger who happens to share your DNA." My mother reached for me again. I stepped away. Goodbye. I walked out without looking back. In the rental car, my hands shook, not from anger, not from grief, from relief. I called Dr. Williams that night. How do you feel? She asked. Free, I said. 2 years have passed since that day. My business has expanded to 3 cities. We employ over 50 people now. I started a foundation for homeless teenagers, kids who remind me too much of myself. I bought a house. I adopted a dog named Buster, who greets me like I'm the best thing that's ever happened to him. Ethan is still here, steady, present, respectful of my boundaries. He doesn't ask me to forgive. He just asks me to live. Lucas and I rebuilt something slowly, carefully. We talk once a week. He's in therapy too. He's never pushed me about our parents. That matters. Last month, a handwritten letter arrived from my mother. I read it once, then I threw it away. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt nothing. And that's how I knew I'd healed. They once wrote, "You'll figure it out." They meant abandonment. I turned it into freedom. I figured out how to survive, how to thrive, how to build a family from choice, not obligation. I figured out that their failure to love me was never about me. And most importantly, I figured out that I was always enough.